Welcome back. In today's lesson, we're going to learn about the second form that a linear equation can take that represents a line. So in the last lesson, we learned slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. Today's lesson, we're going to learn something called point-slope form. It's still the graph of a line, but it's just presented in a different way. So after the lesson today, you'll be able to write a linear equation in point-slope form if I give you a slope and a point, 2 points, or a graph, and you can graph a function, a linear function, if you're given the equation in point-slope form. So this is what point-slope form is. We're going to read it out loud here. I'm going to highlight it. I get my color working. So point slope form is y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. Let's break that down a little bit. So the first part I notice about this equation is I've got two y's and I've got two x's. Well, this little x1 and this little y1 represent coordinates. So the y1 is your y coordinate that exists on the graph, and your x1 is an x coordinate that exists on the graph. And those two things form one coordinate pair at x1, comma, y1. So they form a coordinate pair. So that takes care of the x1 and the y1. x1 and y1. Then we've got in the middle, we've got our m. What did m stand for in y equals mx plus b? Well, it stood for the slope. So m represents the slope. The x and y variable here and here, that's what any other point on the line could be. We could plug x, find a coordinate along the line, plug that in, it would make the equation true. And the whole point we have this form is so we can look at the equation right away and find a point and find a slope by not doing really any math, just by looking at it and seeing it. So let's make a note of that. So the whole purpose of this form is that we can find slope m and a point on the line. And that point on the line is that x1, comma, y1, okay? So that's the basic definition of point-slope form. So here are the things that we should be able to learn in point-slope form. The first thing I want you to be able to do is I want you to be able to write an equation in point-slope form with the given slope and through the given point. So remembering that slope is your m, so this is saying that m equals 4, okay? And this 5 and this 7, that's my x1, that's my y1. So now I've got my x1, I've got my y1, I can go ahead and plug these in. When I do this, I keep the y from the formula, from the form, y minus y1. I'm going to put in minus from the formula, and then a 7, because that is my 7 is the y1, and then equals, m is 4. I'm going to use a different color for that m being 4 there. Use purple. So then the 4 goes here, parentheses, keep the x, keep the minus, and then x in this case is 5. So this is my given the point, given a slope, this is my equation in point-slope form. Y minus 7 equals 4x minus 5. There's a slope at 4 and a point at 5, comma 7. I want you to notice something about the signs. Here, 5 and 7 are positive, but in the equation, what did 5 and 7 become? They became negative. So it's important to note here that the signs did switch, and we're going to see if that pattern continues throughout the other examples. So in example B, I've got x1 is -3, y1 is 5, and I've got a slope of -1/2. When I plug this in, my form is y minus something, this is my skeleton, equals mx minus something. So that's sort of my skeleton for my equation. When I plug these in, the y plugs in as 5, the x plugs in as -3. Because it's -3 in the coordinate pair, and my slope is -1/2 in front. Now notice the y minus 5 doesn't change. It stays y minus 5, the 1/2 stays -1/2, but this x minus -3 both become positive, and I get x plus 3. Now let's go back and look. Did my signs change? Did I go from -3 to +3? Yep. Did I go from +5 to -5? Yes. So we can have an understanding that when we plug the point into the form, we switch the sign. So with that knowledge in mind, we'll make a note of that here, that the signs of the point switch when writing the equation. So in example C, I've got my point at 4, -10, x1, y1, slope is -2. When I go to plug those in, I get y plus 10, I switch the sign, equals -2, keep the slope the same, x minus 4, change the sign. Okay, and example D, -2 is my x1, -5 is my y1, and my slope is 4/5. So my equation is going to be y plus 5, change that sign, keep the slope sign the same, x plus 2, change the sign. So that's taking a point and a slope and putting it into point slope form. And that's the first thing I want you to be able to do, and understand that that equation still is going to be the graph of a line. If you were to plug in an x value and find a y value, those would be coordinates along the line that you'd find, just like y equals mx plus b forms a line. This is just a different representation. I want you then to be able to do the reverse of this example. I want you to be able to look at a point slope form and identify first the slope. Oops, wrong pen. Identify the point from the equation, and I want you to be able to pull out the slope from the equation. So that means I want you to be able to find m, and I want you to be able to find a coordinate pair. Okay, and I'm going to make this a different color here. So find that slope, find that coordinate pair. So to me, the slope is the easier one to find. Slope is just that number in front of the parentheses, so your slope in this case is 7. Your coordinate pair, your x1 is going to go here in front, and your y1 is going to go second, because that's how every coordinate pair exists, as x comma y. And so my x value is +1, but when I put it into the point, I put it in as -1. My y is -5 in the equation, but I'm going to put it in as +5 in as my point. So my point is -1,5, and my slope is 7. The next example in B, I have this negative in front of the parentheses. Remembering that when we have a negative in front of a parentheses, that's an invisible 1 right there. So then my slope is actually -1. Kind of tricky. My point, x comma y, my x here is this -5, so that becomes +5. My y is this +1, so that becomes -1. So my point is going to be 5, -1 along this line. And then example C is a little tricky as well. The slope is not super tricky. It's the number in front of the parentheses, so it's that 5/2. But the point is a little tricky. And the point is tricky because while I have a number here with the x at +2 that goes in as -2, I don't have anything with the y. This is the same thing as saying y minus 0. Because there's nothing there. When nothing's there, we can use the number 0 to represent it. So that means I'm going to put 0 in as a part of my coordinate pair. So -2, 0. If you don't see it, that means there's nothing there. That means the value is 0. So that's moving from point slope form. That's moving from a point and a slope to a point slope form, and then doing the reverse. Okay, there are a couple special cases, just like there were with y equals mx plus b. These special cases have to do with those vertical and horizontal lines we've worked with. Okay, so for example 3, write an equation, again, in point slope form with the given slope and through the given point. When I look at example A, I have a big red flag. The big red flag is that my slope here is undefined. Undefined lines, undefined slope are lines that are vertical. And vertical lines are always x equals something. So we can sort of throw point slope form out the window here because we're not going to have a y. We're just going to have an x. And when we have an x equals, we're just going to look for the x value of the point. So there's 5, so my equation is x equals 5. It's not in point slope form, it's just its own separate equation. You could always draw a picture of this if you wanted to, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my point at 5, 7 and my line that goes through it. That's the equation x equals 5 because it goes through 5 down here. So that's sort of a sketch to be able to help you as well. The other example is also sort of a red flag. I see that my slope is 0. When slope is 0, that is a horizontal line, left to right, and that's always going to be y equals something. In this case, in my coordinate pair, y is 5, so my equation is just y equals 5. Okay, so even though the directions say write something in point slope form, we can't write vertical or horizontal lines in any form except x equals or y equals that value it's going through. So those are two special cases. Okay. I also want you to be able to write point slope form if I just give you 2 points on the line. So if I give you 2 points on the line, then I want you to be able to find the slope and then write it into point slope form. Okay, then this direction also says, then I want you to convert to slope intercept form. So we're going to start off with the first direction, which is write an equation in point slope form given 2 points on the line. So that's the first thing we're going to do. In order to do this, I've got my 2 points. Here's 2 points, here's my second point, but I don't have the slope. And in order to write something in point slope form, I have to have my slope. Well, that's why I put this slope formula here, m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I have this equation here, okay? And so I'm going to use that to find my slope first. So let's label this x1, y1, x2, y2. Find my slope. So it's going to be -5 minus -1 over 0 minus -5. Then when I simplify this, these become positive, and I end up getting -4 over. These also become positive on the bottom, and I have a slope of -4/5. Now that I have my slope, which is here, -4/5, and I have 2 points, I can write my equation in point slope form. It does not matter which point you pick. I usually always pick that first point, but you can pick either point. So I'm going to pick that first point. So I've got my y plus 1. I'm getting the plus 1 from this -1 right here, equals -4/5. That's the slope I just found. Parentheses x from the form. And then my x value is -5 here, so that becomes +5 in my equation. So this is my answer to point slope form. That is what I'm answering here. I found it in point slope form. That answers part 1 of the question. The second part of the question then says, then convert to slope intercept form. So if I'm going to convert this into slope intercept form, I need to remember that slope intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So what I need to do is I need to draw a line here down the middle and get this to be y equals something. I have to get y alone on the left side for it to fit y equals mx plus b. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to distribute the slope to what's inside. Bring down that y plus 1. -4/5 times x is just -4/5 and x pressed together. -4/5 times 5. If you're not sure about that math, go to your calculator. -4/5. Oh, I forgot the negative. -4/5 times 5 gives me -4. So now I can put this becomes -4. I still don't have y alone, so I'm going to go ahead and subtract the 1 on both sides. And I get y equals -4/5 x minus 5. And there's my y equals mx plus b. So that is my slope intercept form, which I'm abbreviating to SI. So this right here, that is my point slope form. That answers the first part. and then the second is my slope-intercept. They both graph the same line. They just give us two different pieces of information. One gives us the slope and the y-intercept. The other gives us a random point along the line and the slope. Okay. So let's do example B, start to finish. The first thing I want to do is find my slope. So this is my skeleton for my slope and my slope formula. x1, y1, x2, y2. So I'm going to have -4 minus 3. And then -1 minus 1. This is going to give me -7 over -2, which gives me +7 over 2. I'm going to go ahead and pick this first point, 1, 3. And when I write this in point slope form, I'm going to have y minus the 3 equals that 7/2 as my slope, x minus the 1 from the point. That is now my point slope form. And you can label it with PS if you want to abbreviate. Now I need to convert to slope-intercept form. So I'm going to go ahead and make my line, distribute that 7/2. Bring down that y minus 3. 7 over 2 times x is 7 over 2x. And then 7/2 times -1 gives you -7/2. And you can put that in your calculator in the future if you're not sure of that math. Then we're going to go ahead and add the 3 to both sides. And I get y equals, that's what I want, y alone, 7x minus 1/2 is what happens when you subtract, do -7/2 plus 3. So there's my slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. Okay. This is a lot of work for one problem, but it's really important to read the directions so you know exactly what form you need your answers to be in. So example 4 is really about converting to slope-intercept, reading the directions really carefully. Okay. Now we need to be able to graph things using point slope form. So example 5 says write the point slope form of the equation of the graph. So we're going to go ahead and rewrite that, what that form is. It's y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. Okay, so that's the formula we use for point slope form. And if we're trying to write it from the graph, we need two things. We need to find the slope of this graph, and we need to find a point along it. So what's the point? What's the slope? So my slope, and I'll do that. I'm going to keep using different colors here. I think that's helpful. So first I'm going to go ahead and make points along the line. A point exists at where the line touches the grid at a right angle here, at a perfect place. So there's a point, and you have to be able to find these points. If you're not sure how, please come ask, because sometimes it can be tricky to find. But those are the points that I found, and they should have the same rise over run no matter where you go. So let's do rise over run. So let's go from this point here, 1, 2, 3. So it goes up 3 over 1, 2. And this is a negative line, so the slope is -3/2. Now that's going to be true no matter where I pick. If I go to here, 1, 2, 3, and go over 1, 2, the slope is the same at both places. That's what makes a line a line. The slope is the same value. We talked about that in the previous lessons. So now I know my slope is -3 over 2, and I can pick any point along the line. I'm just going to go ahead and randomly pick this point right here, and that coordinate pair is -1, 4. Now that I know the point and I know a slope, I can go ahead and write my formula, my form. So y minus the 4 equals -3/2, which is the slope, x plus 1, change that sign. And that's my point slope form. Okay. Same thing with this one. Let's find our slope and let's find our point. Let's first draw in some coordinate pairs along this line. I see one right here. The next one I see is here. And then I see one here. I think 3 is plenty. Finding the slope is 1, 2, 3, 4. So up 4 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this line is positive, so I'm going to keep it 4 over 5, not make it negative. And then I'm going to pick the point here as an example of what happens when we have something with 0. So this coordinate pair is 2, 0. So that means when I go to plug this in, I'm going to have y minus 0 first, leave it like that for now, equals the 4/5 and then x minus 2 from my x value here. I don't want to leave this as y minus 0. It's just not the professional way to leave our answer. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that minus 0 and just write y equals 4/5 x minus 2. And that is my better answer. Even though there's nothing next to the y, that's okay. It's just the simplified form. And then lastly, I want you to be able to do the reverse. I want you to be able to look at point slope form and be able to write the graph of this. In the previous lesson, we graphed by starting with the y-intercept. In this lesson, we're going to start graphing by the point that's given to us in the form. So first step, let's find the slope from this equation, and let's pull out the point we can get from this equation. So the slope is right here at 1/2. So that means my slope is 1/2. The point I'm going to get is from this value -1 and this value -3. When I go to put it into the coordinate pair, I change the sign. So the x value of -3 becomes +3 and the y value of -1 becomes +1. Now I'm going to start here. I'm going to plot that 3 +1 right there, 3 +1, and I'm going to use the slope 1/2 to plot more points. So I'm going to go up 1/2, and I'm going to go up 1/2 across as much of the graph as possible. I can also go down 1 to the left 2. And I'm going up and right and down and left because I want to create a positive line. Okay. All right, so that's how you graph given an equation in point slope form. Let's do one last example. So here, let's find my slope. Let's find the point that's given to me in the equation. My slope is going to be 1/4, and the point, the x value there's +2, so it's going to be -2. Y value here is +4, so the coordinate is at -4. So let's plot -2, -4, which is right here. And then I'm going to use the slope to make more points. So up 1/4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And over 4. Now I can go down 1 and over 4. Down 1 and over 4. And then connect all of my points together. This lesson has a lot of concepts in it. It may take you a while to do all the practice, but you always know what to do if you need help and to ask questions. Please make sure you're reading the directions really carefully. There's a lot of vocabulary as well and things to pay attention to there. Okay? Good luck.